All right. Well, it looks like we're live using the new Facebook Live producer. So, good morning, everybody. This is Kent Davis checking in with you from El Cangrejo, the heart of Panama, Panama. Hope everyone on this presentation is doing well. It's been fun to connect with all of you over these last few weeks. Last week we had a bit of a hiccup with my audio. Hope the audio is working okay. If you can't hear me or if it's choppy, I should probably just stop now. So would be curious if anybody is on to let me know. This is a totally new interface, the live video producer, I think it's called on Facebook, but trial and error. Let's see how it goes. So yeah, all right, there's Emmanuel. Thank you, Emmanuel. Can you hear me okay? It might just be me and you on here, but that's all right. Hope you're doing well, and nice to see you on the presentation. So what we talked about in the past, and it's a similar format. I love answering questions, and I usually come prepared with a few questions that I've gotten over the last week. In this case, we're going to cover questions that I've gotten over the last 2 weeks from folks from around the world, because at the end of the day, you know, the Panama real estate market affects, or at least is interesting for people based here who are thinking about buying and selling. And of course, you know, this is such a expat friendly country that inevitably expats are a big part of the real estate market here. So we got COVID going on, which is obviously the news of the day, the coronavirus. You know, for anyone that's checking in from outside of the country, I'll give you a quick update on what's going on in Panama for the COVID situation. You know, we've been under, Panama has taken a very proactive approach over the last month. The government has done a great job. You know, schools were closed almost a month ago. We've been in full quarantine, or I should say, you know, pretty much full quarantine with 2-hour windows to go out and do grocery shopping for the last, golly, is it 3 weeks now? So yeah, and people for the most part are following the rules. You know, they're not abusing the system. The government has been very proactive in terms of working with private institutions. They haven't been very draconian in terms of, say, things like, oh, you don't have to pay your rent. They did just pass a 3-month moratorium on mortgage payments, which is going to be interesting. I think banks had started to do that. But anyway, so that's the update in terms of Panama's reaction. On a 1 to 10, I would say in terms of, you know, being proactive, we probably have, I don't know, 7 or an 8. You know, we were featured on CNN as doing a good job. So that's something, right? All right, so obviously the real estate market is going to be affected. It's way too early to get a sense. I mean, I've been following sources like McKinsey, the London School of Economics, you know, Drudge Report, Zero Hedge, Market Watch, and, you know, as many other sources. Market Watch just came to me yesterday. That was a good one. I'm going to start paying a lot more attention to that one. The point is that what I've seen is worldwide is about, you know, 15% think that the market is going to be just hit in a majorly negative way. 50% of the market really is not sure, you know, and then the other 40%, I don't even remember what it was, but it was sort of like too early to form an opinion, or I don't even remember. But the point is, my point there is that it's way too early to tell what's going to happen. So one of the ideas for today is to answer a question that someone asked a week and a half ago. It's just, what should I be following right now in terms of key indicators to be watching as a form of being able to predict, all right, so, you know, this is happening, therefore this will probably happen. So I came up with a little bit of a list. The first one is tourism, heads in beds. You know, tourism has always been a leading indicator of the property market in terms of people come down to Panama in January. You know, they like what they see. They had no intention of buying. So maybe they come back again in March. Maybe they come back again in June and make a decision. And then the transaction closes, let's call it in September, right? So you've got a 9-month lead time for the time somebody first comes down to the time they actually make a purchase. I mean, that's a very generalized number, but that's what we've seen. I mean, I've got 15 people working for me in 3 different markets. We've got the city market, the secondary market out at the beach, which is, Coronado, Buenaventura, and then Altos del Maria and El Valle, sort of Panama West Beach. And then we've got Pedesee. And, Pedesee has been a really interesting story. I tell you what, people are much more interested now in getting out of urban environments than they ever have been, I think. So that's going to be super interesting story to follow in terms of people saying, you know what, to heck with this. So tourism, watch tourism. Tourism in Panama was, just starting to pick up a little bit. January, February, March, we were seeing a little tiny uptick in hotel occupancy rates. And finally, the money that we'd been waiting for from, I think it was the World Bank or different sources, a big $200 million initiative in tourism that was going to go into infrastructure, marketing and promotion. And I don't know what the third component was, but man, Pedesee, there's Pedesee. Thank you, Ted. Ted's our expert in Pedesee. And Ted, I appreciate you joining us. We were just talking about the tourism initiatives and how they literally, we were at a tipping point in Panama, I think 3 weeks ago, right when this all started, is when the money finally came into the government coffers to start spending it. So watch tourism. Of course, mortgage defaults, historically, Panama has been a country that has had very low rate of defaults on mortgages, on loans, I should say, both short-term loans like payday loans, et cetera, and long-term loans like mortgages. Of course, the laws in Panama for short-term allow for very easy, automatic deductions. So it's if you're doing a payday loan, it's very easy to get paid by the system. Mortgage loans, that's going to be an indicator as more people have to walk away from their mortgages. Obviously, you're going to have an increase in supply. We don't know how that's going to play out yet. Again, the Panamanian government has been proactive. And in fact, I think it was even this week, passed a law saying, hey, you don't have to pay your mortgage for 3 months. Banks didn't like that too much, obviously, but it is what it is. So watch mortgage defaults. And then rental prices, at least in the city where a lot of these properties are primarily investment properties, rental prices determine the value of the asset at the end of the day if you're looking at yield. So, keep an eye on those. We were starting to see rental prices finally stabilize. They weren't being as hard hit as they had been over the last year and a half. I think the first quarter of this year, our rental portfolio, we managed over 100 properties all in the city, and the prices were sticking, which was very good to see. Days on market were starting to come down. Again, anybody's guess right now. I'm just trying to give some insight into what you can be following now and over the next few months to figure out what direction the market's going. So, all right, what about real estate plays? And this is kind of fun. They call it second order thinking. If this, then that. If we get a vaccine in the next, say, even if we get a vaccine tomorrow, it's not going to be commercially available and widespread for 3 months, 6 months at the earliest. So let's just say we don't have a vaccine. What happens if social distancing will become a reality? I mean, it already is, becomes a permanent reality, and governments are not able to deal with new outbreaks. Governments are not able to, say, contain them by shutting down the economy, because we all know that that's not sustainable. In those scenarios, what's the real estate angle there? And I think, I've got a little list because I've been giving it some thought and listening to people a lot smarter than me on their opinions. You've got, in some instances, a repurposing of commercial into residential, whether that's, offices or multifamily into totally new uses. For example, you've got, a clinic on the ground floor, and then the government basically ships people into these almost like old school leper colonies, right? I mean, it's a 2-week stay at Hotel Coronavirus. That might become a reality, in which case being able to quickly outfit and repurpose commercial properties to accommodate. Hotels are already starting to do that, but yeah, watch for that. I also like the angle of protecting domestic food supply. I think the government, especially in Panama, while it was a priority with this new president, Nito Cortizo, who came in, maybe 4 months ago, I think now it's going to become a lot more of a priority and, in fact, a national conversation where we might see some new legislation supporting the agriculture industry, whether that's in the form of, new debt that becomes available for property, plant, and equipment, whether that's an investment in, what's the word here? We don't do farming yet, other than Ted, who, has some great experience with rice farms. And coincidentally, well, I can get into that a little bit later, but in terms of government infrastructure in agricultural infrastructure, I think that's storage facilities. I think that's transport facilities. I think that's, a cold climate or controlled climate. Megan, hey, if you're looking to buy property as an investor, where's the easiest place to rent property around Panama City? Thank you for the question. So my thought has always been, and I think our managed portfolio supports this, is, sell to the kingdom, not the king. And the same applies if you substitute the word sell with rent. So rent to the kingdom, not to the king. What we've seen is diminishing yields and longer days on market for luxury properties, say over 600,000, which you're going to need somebody with the budget of, let's call it 3,500 a month to get a decent yield. Cut that figure in half or even a quarter, and 150,000, I can generally rent those out for around $900 a month. So, and I can rent that out cheaper. So, Megan, I would say if you were looking to invest in property in Panama in today's market, and I think today's market will be different from tomorrow's market, but all we have is today to base, observations on. I would say that anywhere from, say, 150 to about 350,000 is generally the sweet spot in terms of being able to rent it out as quickly as possible and get the highest yield as possible, because your market is bigger, and because of that, and then you get into appreciation. Obviously, you want to buy for less so you can sell for more tomorrow. That's kind of you're in the real estate industry, so you can appreciate what the word appreciation means, but that's the simple answer. Path of progress plays are very interesting, getting out in a place like Santana, which is just on the outskirts of our historic district. Great question. Thank you. Thank you for asking questions, guys. I do appreciate that. The real estate plays. I think food security is going to be an issue. I think, in the commercial market, expanded work environments, i.e., you got a call center that currently has 300 people. Well, with social distancing rules, you're going to need maybe twice as much real estate to house the same amount of employees. So that could be a much needed shot in the arm for our commercial real estate market. You've also got people who are realizing, oh, wow, I can work from home. Maybe I should get a bigger home. Maybe I should buy my neighbor's place, rent it out, and then when the next pandemic hits, I'll just move into the neighbor's place, assuming it's not rented, and there's my home office. I think guys who are selling soundproofing systems, and other ways to accommodate home offices are going to be doing very well. So, social distancing and work from home environments are going to play out in ways that we don't even know yet. And then what I mentioned earlier in terms of second order real estate plays that could come from this shift, this complete change in the market, is people getting out of urban centers. People moving to places where you can be on a 1 acre lot, where you don't see your neighbors, where you don't form a line at the grocery store. Places like Pedesí, places like, Altos del Maria, as I mentioned earlier, places like the beach, where you can just not have as many neighbors. Megan, you're awesome. You're on fire. Investors backing out. I mean, the biggest fear of investors is uncertainty. I've got a few of my family office clients who are licking their chops right now. They're saying, a couple of them are based in Europe. They're saying, man, we are done with the Eurozone. We are convinced that the Eurozone is on a decline. Now, I am not. Obviously, Panama is what I do. I watch world markets, but I'm a novice when it comes to reading the tea leaves. But the general consensus is in that McKinsey survey that included France, Spain, and Italy in terms of consumer confidence, investor confidence, and the Eurozone's ability to recover was overwhelmingly pessimistic compared to the US, at least. Latin America wasn't on there. But man, thank God we've kept a couple deals together. I haven't had any deals that fell. We did have to renegotiate some deals. Matthew Marks on our sales team, they say a deal dies 1,000 times. And anyone in the real estate industry can appreciate that. We had a deal go sideways for $1 million home because the buyer got cold feet. He was making his money off of Airbnb in other markets. The seller initially wasn't being very accommodating, but we sort of helped him understand what could be, he's a smart guy. He's got $1 million property. You don't become, anyway. He's a very accomplished business person. And I think he was more interested in keeping the deal together than he was testing his luck on the new market for $1 million home. So the short answer is investors hate uncertainty. We are in a time of uncertainty, but investors also love, I can say it again this week. We're getting inquiries on hotels we have for sale. $3, $4, $5, $6 million, $15 million hotels. We're getting inquiries on buildings we have for sale. The kind of properties that have been sort of, on the market, one a month if we're lucky. Folks are, and these are investors both in Panama and outside of Panama who seem to think, and hey, I'll support the premise, who seem to think that Panama is going to be able to recover a bit faster than the rest of the world. Of course, they're optimistic if you got a horse in the race, right? But we do have one of the youngest populations in the world. Of course, we're dollar-based, small population. Last check, 4 million, right? And we've been proactive in this. There's money going out on the street. We are on the dollar, no central bank. The government has been very aligned in terms of politically. There's not a whole lot of disparity between, say, Congress and the executive. So, relief has been deployed quickly. We don't have a lot of social unrest right now, which is good. The reality is Panamanians are not big savers. So I think that the next 2 weeks are going to be absolutely critical in what happens. But we do have some underlying fundamentals that I think could help us come out of this quicker than other markets. And therefore, investors are looking at, smart investors look at 12, 24, 36 months from now, right? And also look at opportunities in the market right now because there are motivated sellers. We've had, I think, 6 price reductions this week without even soliciting the sellers. We don't want to go out of our way to solicit price reductions until we can have some clarity on what the market's going to do. All right, Chris, thank you. Opportunities to buy entire buildings. If so, are prices dropping because of the crisis? I think rent rolls will determine how much and if prices come down. Our collections in March were good. We only had about 20% late bucket. So that's people going into 60 days. No, that's 30 and 60 days. So, our rent roll is pretty healthy. April's the critical month, though. And that's a big determinant. You've also got some families that own buildings that might need to liquidate for existing businesses that they have. Hey, let's burn out our apartment building in El Cangrejo because we need to keep our free trade zone inventory levels up, right? Or keep our payroll going. So, those dynamics come in. All right, Chris, last one. Why? Thank you for your questions. And by all means, if anybody else wants to ask questions, looking for a home in an area like Pedesí, How much land would you need to be self-sustaining? I mean, depends on how green your thumbs are, right? I don't know about food production levels. I would say an acre's probably pretty good if you got some meat on there and you like to eat veggie and maybe you got a neighbor that you can trade with. You know, I mean, places like Petitsi right now, coming up on the rainy season, you've got opportunities to grow. Golly, I mean, they say, you know, you throw a cigarette on the ground and 3 months later, tobacco plant, right? Maybe only I say that. Tomatoes, peppers, onions, yucca, corn, livestock will obviously grow, you know, cows, pigs, chicken, etc. Panama has 2 growing seasons. We don't get cold enough to frost. You know, the soil in most places is volcanic, or at least in some of the highlands. Petitsi, I think, is going to have more sand and clay. Ted can attest to this. Obviously, water source is critical anywhere. Soil quality is critical. But yeah, I mean, self-sustaining, my family would probably need about 10 acres because my boys eat and they like their meat. But dad can go veg. I mean, you know, might lose a little weight. But yeah, golly, I think that's, I hope I've started to answer that question. Maybe Ted can fill in a little bit. But yeah, other questions that I've had, pre-construction. So, you know, pre-construction moves a little bit slower in terms of volatility. Developers are less pressed for cash if they're in the pre-sales phase, i.e. developments haven't started. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the Panama real estate environment, both pre-COVID, in the middle of this, and how it could play out afterwards. Pre-construction, again, developers, depending on at what stage a developer is in. If the developer has completed inventory, i.e. I just finished my building and I just want to sell out, they're going to be a lot more motivated than, you know, I've been doing pre-sales for the last 3 months. I need to get another 8 units sold before the bank gives me my money to build. You know, I mean, if they need 1 more unit sold, it's always interesting to be that guy to help tip them into construction. You know, the developers are more willing to do a deal. But yeah, of course, there are deals to be had. You got to know which developments and which developers. But I would say in general, pre-construction is interesting because it's a low capital outlay. You know, you don't have to put a lot of cash down now. And you're sort of betting on the future in 1, 2, 3, 4 years' time. Obviously, you need to get aligned with a good developer. You want to be in path of progress. You got to check a lot of things like, hey, how can my views be obstructed? What's the noise? What's the rental market? I mean, 100 different things you want to look at when you're considering pre-construction. But, you know, if you're optimistic on Panama, it's a nice sort of low skin in the game play. And I think it's going to fare well. You know, pre-construction is also easy to look at because it's not built yet. So, you know, we are going to face the environment of less buyers being able to come to Panama in the short term. And I think that people who want to get out of their markets immediately, people that have been watching the market for a while and are comfortable with, you know, the area, the developer, the price point, the floor plans, the views, obviously that's an easy deal to pull the trigger on if you're not here in Panama. So that's going to be an interesting space to watch right now is pre-construction. How has my week been in terms of inquiries and closings? Well, again, we closed that $1 million deal this week. Thank God. I think each one of my sales team has 2 or 3 deals that are literally just at like public registry, notaries, pasisalvos, which are the good standing certificates. So they're pretty much at the finish line. And based on our sales meeting and conversations this week, you know, all the buyers are moving forward. So it's just a matter of the logistics about getting things closing. And man, I mean, we're still getting leads. You know, let me check my leads report here for the last week in terms of new inquiries. This is people writing to us saying, hi, I'd like to see this property, or at least I'm curious. This is online, not phone calls. Let's see here. 68, right? Now, that's also people subscribing to reports, engaging us in terms of jumping on a mailer. So, hey, that's not bad. I think now more than ever, people are starting to browse. I mean, CEOs, fund managers are all sitting at home. And once they get their work done, a lot of them, I probably ought to start my Panama research now that I got some bandwidth. That's what our week has been looking like. For those of you that have just joined us, if anybody's checking in from overseas, quick update on Panama. We are a month into school closures. We are 3 weeks into essentially a full quarantine with like 2-hour windows. This weekend, nobody can go on the street. So Saturday, Sunday is like full lockdown. Stores are still open for the most part, grocery stores and drugstores. Stocks are fine. There's been no panic buying other than everybody's, compelled to buy toilet paper, but we had plenty of toilet paper here. Overall, I think the Panamanian government has been getting praise both locally and internationally for the handling of the crisis and being quick to react. Let's see how it plays out. All we can do is read the tea leaves we got in front of us. You can't predict anything. But I think, and I mentioned this already, but the reasons that I'm optimistic are we have one of the youngest populations in the world. As I mentioned, the government is being very proactive. People are sort of honoring the social distancing for the most part and definitely staying off the street. Dollarized economy, small country, safe, stable. I mean, the fundamentals. Anybody that's living in Panama or has been here already knows the deal. But so that's kind of where we're at. Van Sprang, did prices drop already? We do have some sellers who are anticipating prices dropping. So they've gone ahead and dropped their prices. They've contacted us to lower their prices. Pedicee, we had a property that went from 400,000 to I think 350,000, which is what? I mean, that's like 8%. That's not insignificant. I think it's more a function of A, people's perception on what is coming up, and B, people's need for liquidity right now to support existing businesses. I'm no expert on the other markets. I've been doing this for 13 years, but I think real estate is one of the least volatile or at least slowest moving asset classes, right? I mean, stocks and bonds are up and down by the minute, but the fact that they're not as liquid means, you don't have as many transactions that drive prices up or down at any given moment. I think between us, I mean, golly, you would think prices ought to drop in the short term, right? As people are sort of reeling from what's going on. But midterm, you just can't predict it. I mean, it's like, Clint, thank you. Rental home sales in May of 2021. Your rental home sells. I'm using that to purchase my PC condo, hopefully from us. How many months in advance do I need to start the mortgage application process? Now, because it's long and tedious. If you're currently banking with someone locally, engage them. I've heard you can get a mortgage, but it's very lengthy and convoluted process. Yeah, exactly. You heard right. It's not impossible. Expect 30 to 40% down. So, 60% financing at, let's call it 6.5%. I mean, rates have come down slightly based on the U.S. Fed's reduction. But that's the long story on mortgages, Clint. Thank you for asking. Van Sprague, hopefully that answered your question. Let's see, any other questions? Not yet. Fire them away. Otherwise, I'm gonna go cook some lunch. But I mean, watch this space, guys. We're gonna be doing different kinds of presentations over the next week or two. Next week, I'm gonna do a presentation focused on sellers, what you can be doing at home, do-it-yourself projects, ideas, ranging from handyman and women to, I mean, if I replace a toilet flapper in my house, that's like a huge accomplishment, not because I'm lazy, but because I'm likely to break the toilet. So yeah, down to non-handy folks like myself. But like I tell my wife, I can't do it, but I know 10 people that can, and I can call them all. So yeah, watch this space for that. We are also going to be doing an investors geared presentation on really specific market dynamics. Speculation on interest rates. I mean, interest rates, I think, are likely to come down, Matthew, based on what's happening in the States. But as you know, Panamanian banks are a lot less likely. And now, with the hiatus or the furlough, the 3-month furlough on mortgage payments, I think, banks typically have been very cash rich in Panama. Their liquidity ratios, which I understand is a measure of health for banks, are good. Interest rates are high in Panama. So, that means that banks are still making money as well, for better or for worse. Yeah. So, hi, Chris Kinker. Right, Jonathan. Yes, our other Pedicy expert. And by the way, Jonathan Clay, ladies and gentlemen, has been kind enough to share some pictures of some land that he's actually prepping for food production. I mean, we're talking dirt getting moved, manure getting laid. So watch this space. We've got some real experts on the team in terms of folks who can give insight into production quality. We're working with a family office from Scandinavia who has bumped up their interest level. I mean, that's a light way of putting, they've moved money in Panama to execute on a very big farm purchase in and around the Panama area for food production. That area specifically, depending on your elevation, high elevation crops like coffee, and avocado, and then lower elevation crops like citrus, pineapple, rice. And this is all land we're looking at 200 to 400 hectares right along the water. So year-round water supply. Man, these guys are chomping at the bit. As soon as the quarantine breaks, we're going to go get some boots on the ground. And I think there's going to be a purchase and a major operation going in out there. And, this has actually sped up their appetite for getting this operation going, this crisis, because they know things I don't know in terms of local demand. They're out of, like I said, Scandinavia area, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, private equity players that are already doing agriculture in the region have been watching Panama for a while, have been vetting properties with us for a few months, and have gotten extra serious now. So it's interesting. Any other questions? I mean, the talking head over here. We're going to try to do this every Friday, and I always try to come here with questions that I get over the week, but live questions are great too. ... Well, if that's the case, thank you for joining us. Hope this message finds everyone healthy, being respectful of your local quarantine laws, staying positive, staying busy, using this time to be productive. And what was is a Bruce Lee quote that I shared this morning. Gotta love some Bruce Lee. I'll leave you with this one. Drum roll, please. I like this. So everybody's out there reading books and trying to learn. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Willing is not enough. We must do. How about that from the master? So yeah, guys, go out and do good things. Do big things. Stay strong. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. This is Kent Davis, the guy running the ship over at Panama Equity. As you can see, we've got some very knowledgeable team members who were nice enough to join the presentation. Thanks for jumping in, guys. We keep, we're always dedicated to delivering a professional experience. So you can count on us for answers to your questions, being straightforward, especially during these times. Take care, everyone. Ciao.